are a Canadian or Mexican citizen and you work under the profession of an engineer, and in this video we're specifically talking about a computer engineer, or those would could potentially qualify for TN status under the occupation of a computer engineer, which according to the US Department of Labor encompasses many different titles. For example, computer hardware engineers, computer network architects, computer programmers, software developers, and computer systems engineers are all reported titles that, according to the Department of Labor, fall under the engineering profession for computer professionals. Now, it's important to understand for TN visa purposes, when you're looking at the TN occupations list, the TN occupations list lists engineer. However, it doesn't specifically list on the original occupations list the occupation of a computer engineer. Well, in July 2000, there's a memo. It's a famous memo if you deal with TN visas. It's called the Cronin memo. And in that memo, it clarifies that computer-related engineering professions can qualify for TN status as engineers. So it is not just limited to your standard engineering professionals such as mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, civil engineers. It has been expanded to include computer-related engineering professions. Well, if you find yourself in that situation, you have a job offer in the United States, or you are looking for a job in the United States and want to identify whether or not you qualify for TN status as a computer engineer, here are the basic requirements that you need to demonstrate to show that you qualify for TN status in the United States as an engineer. Number one, you have to be a Canadian or Mexican citizen. Number two, you have to have a job offer from a U.S. employer or have a contract to service a U.S. client. And that contract should indicate that you'll be performing duties, or that job offer should indicate that you are performing duties that are consistent with a computer engineering profession. And how do you determine that? Well, it can be a little bit tricky, but in the end, you would have to compare your duties against what the US Department of Labor indicates that a computer engineer would do. As long as your duties are consistent with the duties according to the US Department of Labor, then that would potentially qualify for TN status under a computer engineering profession. The next thing you have to do is verify whether or not you have the proper education. And the education isn't as straightforward as it sounds. You would have to show, and we're talking about computer engineers here, that you have a bachelor's degree in a computer engineering or closely related field. You can also qualify if you have a state or provincial engineering license, which typically does not apply to computer engineers. Now, your education must be at least a 4-year degree here. It cannot be anything less. It cannot be an associate's degree. It cannot be a diploma or a certificate. It cannot be a combination of education and experience. It must be a 4-year degree in a computer engineering related field. If it is not, then you will not qualify for TN status with your education. And you cannot qualify under this occupation with experience either. So you must have a 4-year degree that is equivalent to a US 4-year degree in engineering or computer engineering related field. Very important to understand. If you do not have that minimum education requirement, then you may not qualify for a TN visa, unfortunately, due to the antiquated requirements. So very important to understand, you must have that 4-year degree, and it must be equivalent to a US 4-year degree. And the final thing you need to be able to demonstrate if you're trying to get TN status is that this is temporary, that you're coming to the United States on a temporary basis, that you have no intention of immigrating to the United States at the time that you're applying for your TN. Now, intent is fluid. Intent can change after you enter the United States. But it's very important that at the time that you are applying, that you clearly demonstrate that you're coming in to work for your client or your employer on a temporary basis, that you have no intention of coming here permanently. And another advantage of a TN is that if you are a Canadian, you can apply for TN directly at a port of entry. You do not have to go to a consulate first. And you can also apply by mail with U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services to get pre-approval. Most Canadians are going to opt for the border option because it is faster and much less expensive. Mexican citizens, however, are more limited in their options to apply for TN status. Most Mexicans are going to have to first obtain a TN visa at a U.S. consulate before they can enter the United States and work. If they're already here in the United States, however, they may be able to file for a change of status with USCIS from a visitor over to a TN, or you can change employers by filing with USCIS in the United States as well. And dependents of a TN visa holder will qualify for what is called TD status. And this is for spouses, so you have to be married. Unfortunately, if you're Canadian and you are common law, that does not qualify for meet the marriage requirement for U.S. immigration. And children that are unmarried under the age of 21 can also qualify for TD status. To allow them to live in the United States and go to school, neither a spouse or child of a TN visa holder is allowed to work in the United States. Hopefully this video clarifies the requirements for TN status as a computer engineer, and will help you determine whether or not your offer in the United States will qualify you for a TN as an engineer, and whether or not your education would meet those minimum requirements as well. We assist Canadian and Mexican citizens all the time in obtaining TN status. So if you need assistance with this process, we'd be glad to help you out.